Revelation 21, 1-5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new."
Good morning. I'm David Brooker, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this online gathering of the Hartwell and Surrey Hills Churches of Christ for Sunday the 26th of July. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live. For most of us, that will be the Wurundjeri or Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, thanking them for their care of the land and paying our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We're often disappointed by life. Things don't always go as we might like. And when that happens, we can experience frustration. We may feel angry at the world in general or at some people in particular. We may get down on ourselves, perhaps blaming ourselves for things that really are quite out of our control. The current resurgence of the COVID virus in Melbourne is a good case in point. Many of us discern a deep sadness within us at the prospect of months in isolation. Some are quick to point the finger and berate those they consider to be responsible. And some will find themselves going to quite dark places within as the isolation lingers. All these responses are quite human and very reasonable. It's not a place in which any of us would want to stay for long, however. So how do we turn it around? How do we reframe the situation, even though the context may continue to be difficult? How do we rise above the circumstances of life, as it were, to maintain a healthy and balanced perspective on our own existence? How can we find delight and beauty, meaning and peace of mind in a flawed world? Well, that's our focus for this morning. In overt and covert ways, we will attempt to answer that question. In conversation, in music, in reflection and in prayer, we will seek to discern the ways in which Creator Spirit is operating, even in difficult and puzzling times, to make all things new. Thanks for taking this journey with us.
Hi. For those who don't know me, may I introduce myself in this corner of my kitchen. My name is Trevor, and I used to live a couple of streets away from the Avenue Church. I now live in Panton Hill, about 20 minutes drive past Eltham. Like lots of folk, I surround myself with items whose value is in the stories attached to them. It takes a village to raise a child. The stories attached to these items reminds me of the kindness and the love of my community and family. The candle holder is a gift from my sister. The table, which in a previous life was painted bright aqua, sitting in the chook shed, belonged to a great aunt. The clock came from another great aunt, who only permitted plonking on her piano by 6-year-olds as long as they stayed on the black keys. The photograph of my youthful grandfather with his sailing cobbers, taken about 1919. The cabinet, a gift from Ray Minahan, a man I want to grow up to be like. The Nautilus shell, picked up from the beach, 90 Mile Beach from the Gippsland Lakes, is a reminder of both the place and my dad. In these times of isolation, I only need a quick glance around my cluttered house and I see the faces of my village, the people who have nurtured and loved me. Shall we light the candle for this morning's service? Today's candle is a point of light in a slightly gloomy world. A world facing the COVID pandemic, an economic recession and disasters of the natural and humankind. But we light this candle to proclaim our conviction that, by and large, people are good and caring and will pull together for the healing of the world. That light will always overcome darkness, and that in ways we may not immediately recognise, Creator Spirit is making all things new. Shall we read a Michael Leunig prayer? Love is born with a dark and troubled face. When hope is dead and in the most unlikely place, love is born. Love is always born. Amen.
Gwen Pallot is one of the living treasures of the Avenue Churches of Christ and has been part of the community for many, many, many years and been actively engaged in almost every aspect of church life throughout that time. Along with her husband, Doug, she helped to form the values that have shaped our church and the people who call it home. Gwen, welcome and thank you for sharing this conversation with us this morning. It's just so delightful to see you and to be able to see your face and be able to talk to you. So thank you for giving us this time.
Thank you.
I said in the introduction that you've been part of the congregation for many, many, many years. How many years is it, Gwen, just as a matter of interest?
Well, it's since 1971.
Wow, yeah, that's a fair while then. That's great. That's amazing. Really good. Similar sort of question in a way, but completely different. As a matter of interest, how many grandchildren and great-grandchildren do you have these days? What's the number up to?
The grandchildren are 17.
Wow.
more girls than boys, and the great-grandchildren, 22, and there's one coming.
That's incredible, isn't it? How on earth do you keep track of all those birthdays?
Well, I do. They did come one by one. The
Uh,
children came one by one, and I write everything down.
Remarkable. What a wonderful family to have. It must give you a sense of satisfaction and maybe even pride to see your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren growing into competent, well-formed young men and women. Does it give you that sense of satisfaction to see that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
They're all individuals, and they're all different.
Yes, yeah. Which you would want them to be, wouldn't you?
Mm, yeah.
Tell me, Gwen, what are some of the things that sort of bring you delight or give you a sense of satisfaction in life? What are some of the things that bring joy to your heart?
Well, I have lots of projects that I want to complete, and I feel I have responsibilities to fulfill. And when I manage to get one of them out of the way, I'm really delighted. That's one of them.
Yep.
Another one, way back from when I was a girl, I loved drawing and painting and sketching and calligraphy. I had a good teacher, I think that was the reason, but he inspired us. And every moment that I had spare, I was doing watercolour or one of these sort of things, yes.
Mm. And do you don't dabble in that now? You sort of let that behind?
No, I don't. I don't really. I don't really care much about it nowadays. I do love to go to art galleries and to look at beautiful pictures, ancient and modern, and I'm interested in it, but I'm not very active now.
Yeah.
That's what I find. We change, or events change us.
Yeah.
Circumstances change
So
us.
life moves on a bit. So what are some of the things that have, like you've sort of moved into a different phase of life? What are the some, and particularly, I guess, we're all in a different phase of life now with the COVID isolation that we're experiencing. But what are some of the things that you do now in the context of this lockdown period to bring some joy and light and satisfaction to your life?
Well, an abiding joy and pleasure has always been reading, and that is one that's never gone. And so from way back when I was a bit of a kid and I read all the old classics and Dickens and Hardy and all that stuff, I have continued to read. I'm reading something at the moment now that Sarah, I think, must have been reading recently. It's Thomas Cromwell, who was his master was the evil Henry VIII, who killed all his close people he was close to eventually, including Thomas.
So do you enjoy that historical sort of based novel, or do you have a particular sort of form or genre of reading that you enjoy most?
No, not, yes, quite a lot of, often it's historical. I quite enjoyed the Roman stories of Colin McCullough. I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
The First Man in Rome and the Grass Crown, those ones. I found that very interesting. Yeah. People are the same then as they are now.
Yeah, so you think there are common traits in humanity that persist through the generations?
Irrespective of culture and time, we're still much the same as people.
Let me throw in a question there that links with that first question I asked. Do you see in your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the values and qualities that have shaped your lives and your children's lives, do you see them emerging in those new generations as well?
Yes, I do. It's most interesting when I've got so many to see all the likenesses to uncles and aunts and parents. Yes.
So that's an important sort of, like it's one of the things that we hand on to the successive generations, isn't it? Those values and qualities, and we hope that it forms them as they go along. And so it's really good to see that they emerge, I suppose, because it does give us a bit of hope for the future of the world, I reckon.
Our relationships with our children, and of course with all our friends, our family, our friends, these are great joys, and I think that these perhaps are the most important of all. These delights.
So, final question, Gwen. As one of the, you might say, one of the matriarchs of our community of faith, and someone who's very special to our community, what's one thing you might like to say to our community as we move forward? One piece of wisdom that you might like to share with us?
Well, I would say these relationships are to be fostered, and with children, reading to them is very important. Even when they can read well themselves, that doesn't matter. They love being read to, and it's good to do that with them. It's something they will always remember.
So nurture those relationships, hey?
Yes, and not just the family, of course. I mean, relationships in general.
Yep.
These are important, and we should let things get in the way of them. That is, we should be blessed peacemakers.
What a lovely idea, and what a great notion for us to conclude our conversation on. Gwen, thank you so much. It's been a little snapshot, but we could talk for a lot longer about all sorts of things, but it's just been lovely to be able to chat with you and hear from you. And we look forward to the time when we can actually get back together again physically as a community, and maybe we'll pick up some of these conversations with you again. Thank you very much for sharing with us, Gwen.
It's a privilege.
Katrina Wilson is one of the drivers of our community of faith, not by virtue of any loud or pretentious personality, but by dint of her generosity of time and energy, her hospitality and care. I'm going to chat with Trine about some of the pursuits that bring delight and meaning to her life. But first, here's a glimpse into the world that Trine creates. Wow, that's one impressive video, Treen. I'm particularly impressed with all of the metalwork stuff because it's stuff that I just have no idea of how to, how do you use a welder and how do you use a plasma cutter? How's it feel to have things as powerful as that in your hands and be working with them?
Scary. Yeah, scary in that you realise that I'm working with fairly dangerous equipment here.
Yeah, yeah. How did you get into it? I mean, what made you think I'm going to learn how to weld? I'm going to do some metal work.
Probably it comes down to looking at my family and looking at what everyone does and not wanting to repeat what anyone does. So we've got quilters, potters, glass blowers, resin workers, painters, and I just thought, well, I need to do something that's different. So why not?
You sure found something different. But metalwork's not your only creative outlook, is it? Cakes, needlework, stone wall building, and of course you're fairly creative with your bargain hunting as well. So where does the inspiration for all that creativity come from?
I'd have to blame Mum, Dot, really, I suppose. Ever since we were little, Mum would get up on a Saturday morning and there was nothing for her to make a new tennis skirt to wear to tennis that afternoon or to make vanilla slices for afternoon tea. So nothing was ever too difficult for her. And she always just let me use her sewing machine. She let me cook. And I've served up all manner of meals when I was younger that, blue cauliflower, you name it, she'd let me try. And I just really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's good. We've seen some pictures of some of your finished work, whether it's cakes or metalwork or whatever. How does it feel as the creator when you finish and you stand back and you look at what you've created? How does that feel?
Sometimes really proud. Sometimes I sort of feel like, oh, yeah, I can see all the flaws, but I hope no one else can. But I do get a sense of accomplishment, and I get a sense of, and probably this will come out a bit further, but I get a sense that, like when I do a wedding cake for friends, and I know that I can give them something that would cost them an enormous amount of money, and it's cost me my time and $70, I feel really proud that I can do that for them.
Yeah. So is that part of the motivation for doing it? Is it sort of the sense that it's not just gives you satisfaction, but it actually gives pleasure and satisfaction to others as well?
I think when I started making the cakes, there were a couple of things. One of my girlfriends from work, when we were working in oncology, said, why don't we go do one? And I enjoyed doing something with a friend. And we've made cakes together. But one of my things, and the girls may laugh, is that I thought, well, I have 3 daughters. So hopefully I'm going to have 3 wedding cakes. And wouldn't it be lovely to make my daughters wedding cakes? So I think that was the driving force behind my cake decorating. But you just can't keep making cakes. So then I had to sort of develop it onto a bit further of my cookies. And then I've been able to, I think, bring a lot of joy when we did the cookies for Carolyn's book launches. I've done a lot for Christmas presents that Mum's been able to give to her people that she has in her classes. So to be able to give my stuff away, and even though if you look online, my stuff's not nearly as good, without knowing very much, people think they look great. So, I enjoy doing that.
Yeah. You're incredibly productive, I reckon, and some of us appreciate benefiting from some of that productivity, which is excellent. So, like the creativity gives you a sense of satisfaction, and it gives pleasure to others, and there's a sense of a sense of meaning, I suppose, that comes from that. But do you think there's a deeper, like, creativity is good for the soul? That you sort of hear that. What's that about? Do you think? Do you experience that yourself?
Look, it's very much my happy space, and much to Danny's frustration, I'm not just a one craft type person. I find a real challenge in learning. So at the moment, it's right into natural home products. So making our soaps, our body washes, our beeswax. I've been knitting dishcloths. I've been making dog wash. And that kind of stuff of learning new skills for me is very satisfying. It's also satisfying from I think I'm going very much, as we get old, a bit more hippie. And I do like natural products and organic products. So we're trying to cut chemicals and plastics out. So I feel like I'm achieving that. I think research would show that being creative, and that's whether it's in writing, drawing, looking at art, whatever form of creativity, it actually affects your brain. And they say can sometimes be similar to meditation, where it gets your brain into that space. They also talk about in being creative, you're actually using both sides of your brain, which normally you only use one side, but in using both, journal articles would talk about how long-term effects on memory, so in helping prevent Alzheimer's, in well-being, even in chronic pain, in anxiety issues, that being creative can get your brain to a state where it releases the endorphins to help you, manage life far better.
Yeah, that's really significant in the context of the current COVID stuff, where we can easily sort of be disheartened, I suppose, with our lot in life and the isolation we feel. And so there's a chance that creative pursuit, whether it's us being creative ourselves or us engaging in something creative that other people have done, is actually not just fun, it's actually doing us good. It's actually physiologically promoting our well-being.
Yeah, and it's shown your immune levels, like it's wide range of body effects. So, yeah. But I do know that I'm not a highly stressed person, but if I'm unsettled, just to sit and concentrate on doing something does really settle me. You just have to realise that if you live with a creative person, that life is a bit messier than it could be.
Yes, okay. One of the things, so much of your raw material, certainly for the metalwork, and I know for some other things that you do as well, is recycled. And I'm thinking in terms of our theme for today, making all things new, that sense of taking things that maybe others have discarded or are not being used and creating something new out of them. Is that part of what gives you a buzz?
Oh, absolutely. I was walking through Yarrandarran the other day, and someone had put out 2 hand saws on hard rubbish. So I actually ended my walk carrying 2 saws. It looked sort of a bit like I was ready for it to be attacked in the bush, but I was very excited. I do get excited. I love hard rubbish collections of looking for metal. And there's the most wonderful metal place, recycled junk place in Bairnsdale that Danny just is horrified at. And I just think it's the most wonderful thing to find some rusty old metal. I love it. And the possibility of what I could do with it. Yeah, plasma cutting, you just need metal to practice with. And I think that's what I'm realising at the moment, that it's just a matter of going down and playing and increasing your skill set.
Just you've mentioned soap making and other things. What have you got anything new on the horizon? Any new interests or hobbies that are emerging at the moment?
No, look, I'm always looking for things. I did a little while ago a bronze casting course because I was quite interested in doing that, and I think I've ended up with probably the most expensive 2 bronze birds that probably are the heaviest paperweights you're ever going to see, but decided that was just too dangerous. I just wasn't prepared for that one. So no, look, I'm always trying to do something new and different, but probably what I need to do is concentrate a little bit more on my perfecting my welding and plasma cutting, which I hope, and I think you've probably showed photos of my studio emerging down at Meetung.
Yep.
I've got a 3 shipping container studio nearly being built. The roof's on and they're putting the pot belly in today. I'm hoping that when I'm down there, maybe that's a space for me where I can just play.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you bring enormous energy and vitality to life, your own life, but to the life of our community and to the life of other people as well. And the things you offer into that space are quite amazing. So we really value you as part of the community and appreciate the creativity that you bring to that. And it's been great to get a bit of a glimpse into that today. And our time is limited, or we could talk a whole lot more, I think. But thank you very much for sharing with us today. And we look forward to seeing more of your creativity along the way.
Hopefully when we can all get together, hey?
Absolutely. We look forward to that day.
Yeah. Okay, no worries.
Thanks,
Dave. See ya.
See, I am making all things new. It's a hopeful sentence to hold on to, even if at the moment it might be a little bit hard for us to really let it sink in. We look around and we see things new in ways that are not hopeful and not helpful. Every time we talk to each other, the world seems to have shifted yet again into another level or layer of chaos. And we seem to be working out all over again just how we live with that. But in the middle of that, these words come because they were first spoken, well, who knows when they're first spoken, but they're spoken many times in exactly this kind of position. They pop up several times through Isaiah. In Isaiah 42, probably written during the time of the Great Exile in Babylon, when the people of Israel couldn't have even imagined a homecoming, couldn't even imagine coming out of exile to live on their own land, in their own place again. These words were spoken. And then they're repeated in Isaiah 65 and 66 in various forms, the idea of the new heaven and the new earth. And again, a chaotic post-exilic community where remnants of people have come home and they found bomb sites. They found a dysfunctional community or a dysfunctional collection of different communities all working at cross purposes. So the words that we hear in the reading this morning are not words that are spoken as a kind of airy-fairy fluff. They are very much grounded in the types of historic circumstances, the real nitty-gritty of the chaos that peoples all over the world and in every, or almost every generation have had to grapple with. And it gives them quite an intensive content and meaning, I think. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of work on Psalm 46. May need to preach on it at another church by Zoom last week. But it's really, really sat with me. It's the psalm that has those words that are so well known in the middle of them, or towards the end actually, be still and know that I am God. And it makes quite a nice bumper sticker. It's been handed to me as a little card from time to time, and Sometimes there have been words that I found really helpful, and sometimes I've wanted to kick it through the window. But if you look at it in the midst of that actual psalm, it reminds us of what's happening here in the reading from Revelation. Because actually the words for tumult and upheaval are all through that psalm. It talks about nations roaring, the tumult of war, but also the sense that nature itself, mountains, the sort of things that you would think would be the most dependable things in the world are also in a moment of upheaval. Nothing can be depended on, and it feels as if, in the words of whichever poet it is, the centre will not hold. And yet here are those words. Be still and know that I am God. And if we come back to Revelation, we find that leading up to that sentence about making all things new is this sense of the presence of God. God's home will be among mortals. God will dwell with them. God will be with them. Repeated. That sense of withness, of amongstness. The chaos is there, but God is in the midst of it. And it gives a firm ground to stand on as we try to work out what is going to make sense for us. It gives a sense that there is something steadfast to look at, to slow down the sort of nausea of the, I don't know, travel sickness, the eyes moving around trying to catch up with everything that's going on in the world. Here is something steady. I was sharing with some of the people at Soul Space that last Sunday that a poem that just keeps coming back to me through these times is Robert Frost's Choose Something Like a Star, where he gives a description of how difficult it is to know what truth and reality are, and that we want explanations. We want everything to be explained to us so that we can understand it. And says, in times like this, sometimes the best explanation is being. Choose something like a star that simply is. It burns. It is always, absolutely and truly itself. And this, I think, is what the truth of God is for me, that sense of absolutely always itself, absolutely always the being that can be depended on to be, no matter what is going on historically, while there's a very dynamic relationship throughout all of the biblical text and all of our history and our sense of God, there is always that sense of being that is steadfast and in the midst of the chaos gives us some sort of firm ground to stand on. When we come around the table to communion each week, this is what we do. We centre ourselves. Because these elements are not just a piece of bread or a glass of whatever. These elements are not just something we do as a habit that links us to a story. They are truly grounding and formational. I do bang on quite a bit about communion because of my experience for 12 years of being on the international dialogue with the Catholic Church, where we've been looking at what this is for us. And especially the last 6 years where we've been looking at the table of the Lord, the Eucharist, as being formational and transformational. A sense that it makes us when we come around this table. And that's not just some mystical out there, I don't know, I'm not quite sure how I'd describe it, some spiritual ease, some sort of church babble. There's a reality to grounding ourselves in the story of Jesus who on a particular night in a particular historical time and place, which was itself quite chaotic, walked with his eyes open to the cross, was betrayed as we are so often ourselves betrayed, or how we betray ourselves or each other, experienced that and went through a horrific death for the sake of the world. And that story leads us into the invitation that even so, we are people who must live in the midst of chaos and betrayal and pain and hurt. But we can do so in a creative, transformational way. And this is what it means for God to be making all things new. That God takes the pain, takes all of that chaos and difficulty and says, hold it in the great big enormous bowl of love, and it will take on purpose and shape and something beautiful that will lead us into the future, if that future is 2 seconds ahead or if it's years ahead, we can't know and we can't experience, but we can trust that there is one more step to be taken towards, however we might imagine, being transformed into the likeness of Christ, of wholeness, of beauty, of peace, of compassion, of all that allows people to become most who they can be. And so as we take this bread together, we remember that Christ's body was broken for the world, and that we follow by allowing ourselves to be present in the brokenness, to feel our own brokenness, to sit with others who are broken, and know that even that is transformative. That we take the cup, and as we take it together, we understand that it has elements of a covenant, an understanding, a promise, a commitment that says even the shatteredness of relationships that this very story represents leads towards reconciliation when it's undertaken with wholeheartedness and love. And so all things can be made new. All things can be transformed because we sit together as we take this cup and this bread in the transformative love of God. Let us pray together. Spirit of God, you brood over our deep places, our darkness and our chaos. You embrace us with your power to create. You stir in us a desire to grow. Stay with us in our darkness and in our insight, in our formless thoughts and in those we can express, in our chaotic emotions and in our new becoming. We give you thanks for this food which is our life, for the fruits of the earth, conceived in darkness, rooted in the secret soil. We offer you our part in the mess of creativity. We wash, prepare, cook, present. We eat and taste and enjoy with our bodies. We clear away the mess. We celebrate with you the chaos that fulfills the secret labour that maintains life. As we eat and drink together, let us remember that you are continually making, and that you are continually calling us into the wonderful task of making all things new. Amen.
Thank you to Chris, to Trevor, to Gwen, to Trine and to Merrill for their input this morning. And thank you to you for tuning in. It's your presence that really gives meaning to these presentations. You are all welcome to join us for a virtual morning tea that follows the gathering. You can find details of how to connect with that morning tea in the description panel below the video or from our website. There really is so much beauty, so much light, so much goodness in the world and in people. That premise is well supported by the conversations, the images and the creativity evidenced in this morning's gathering. Perhaps it does give us hope and confidence that despite the disappointments and challenges that life throws at us, there is a force at work amongst us and a will within us that continues to affirm that light overcomes darkness, that love wins over hate, that joy can erupt even in the midst of despair, and that ultimately life is continually restored and renewed as the Creator Spirit makes all things new. I pray that might be your discovery and your experience throughout the week ahead. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. Amen.